Hello, I'm Amelia Mary Earhart. Why are you attempting this around-the-world flight was one of the most pertinent of queries. Because I want to was as near a complete reply as I could devise. Here was a shining adventure, beckoning with new experiences, added knowledge of flying, of peoples, of myself. I've wanted to do this for a long time, I told my friend flyer, Louise Thaden, who had flown out to California in hopes of dissuading me. If I should bop off, I will be doing the thing I've wanted most to do. The man with the little black book has a date marked down for all of us when work here is finished. Then, too, it was my belief that women should do for themselves what men have done, and occasionally what men have not done, thereby establishing themselves as persons, and perhaps encouraging other women toward greater independence of thought and action. Independence of thought and action started early for my sister Muriel and I, aided by our parents, and I might add grandparents. Grandfather, the Honorable Judge Alfred Otis, traveled by overland stage and flatboat up the Missouri River to the newly opened Kansas Territory of the late 1800s. Father, a railroad attorney, took us far afield. I attended 16 different schools, graduating from Hyde Park High in Chicago. Having lived a peripatetic life, never longer than 4 years in any one place, I think photographs mean more to me than some people. They keep records straight and memories fresh. Thank you. I enjoyed meeting new people and going to new places. I'm sure this was a contributing factor to my love of travel and eventually my love of flight. On my round-the-world flight, I kept a diary of the many cultures I encountered and tried to steal off and see a bit of the country. I remember thinking and jotting down when I was a little girl in Atchison, Kansas, the adventures of travel fascinated me. There with my sister Muriel and my cousins, I gratified this ambition through make-believe. There was a barn behind our house in Atchison. There, in an old, decrepit carriage, we made imaginary journeys full of fabulous perils. Early on, we discovered the special joys of geography. The various maps that fell into our clutches supplemented the hair-raising experiences in that old, decrepit carriage. Map travel took its place beside window shopping as an accepted diversion. Africa was my favorite. The very word meant mystery. Blithely, we'd roll on our tongues such names as Senegal, Timbuktu, Khartoum. We weighed the advantages of the River Nile, the comparative ferociousness of the Tigray and Swahili. No Stanley, Livingstone, or Rhodes ever explored with more enthusiasm than we. As the girl grew older, the inclination did not mend. As flying brought far places closer, the horizon and what lay beyond gained added lure. Our physical and athletic abilities were encouraged by our mother at a time when girls did not explore such talents. Not surprising, since Mother was the first woman to climb the last mile of Pikes Peak. Undaunted by the neighbors' inevitable critical glances, Mother made us the first gymnastic suits in town, which we displayed on Saturdays, much to the disdain of the other properly skirted little girls. We felt very free and athletic. Restrictive clothing leads to restrictive lives. As my sister Muriel will attest, I was always redesigning our clothes, partly out of necessity for lack of funds due to Dad's battle with the bottle, and to bring about ease of movement and simplicity. Fame works in mysterious ways. Here I was, criticized for cropping my hair and wearing pants, when in 1934, I found myself designing fashion, modeling, and writing for fashion magazines. Harper's Bazaar said of me, "To the intricacies of actual designing, she brought two refreshing, almost surprising abilities: unerring good taste and a brilliant ingenuity of valid ideas." Tradition hampers just as much as clothing. From a period when girls were thought not to be able to do anything comes a natural doubt when they attempt new or different activities. I know I worried my grandmother considerably by running home from school and jumping over the fence that surrounded her house. "You don't realize," said my grandmother, "that when I was a small girl, I did nothing more strenuous than roll my hoop in the public square." I felt very unladylike, and for the next succession of days, I walked around to the gate. Now, probably, if I had been a boy, such behavior would have been entirely natural. This attitude extends to the types of jobs women may enter. I've kept account of the types of jobs women could and will occupy: ranching, mechanics, armed services, police force. I freely admit that I have used the position which I have been thrust into to accelerate the status of women, in addition to interesting them in aviation and promoting flying as commonplace. I do predict that commercial flying will be as normal as train travel is today. I'm not exactly sure when I became interested in airplanes or the search for the happy adventure, but I do know that when Muriel was 6 and I was 8, we built a backyard roller coaster. We used the corner of a wooden shed 12 feet high, 15 feet long, greasing the tracks with lard. I jumped on the sled, and as Muriel recalls, I yelled excitedly, "Sis, it's wonderful, it's just like flying." And then I crashed. At age 10, my first airplane was pointed out to me by a grown-up. But I was more interested in a peach basket hat I had purchased for 15 cents. Now, what would a analyst say about that? I think I really became interested in airplanes in the winter of 1918. I had seen one or two at county fairs, but now I saw many of them as the officers were being trained at the various fields around the city. Of course, no civilian had the opportunity of going up, but I hung around and absorbed all I could in my spare time. I remember the sting of the snow on my face as the snow was blown back from the propellers at the training place took off on skis. I remember well when that snow stung my face. I felt the first urge to fly. My next encounter with flying was just after the armistice. A friend and I found ourselves at an exhibition of stunt flying. We planted ourselves in the middle of the field. The flyer rolled and looped and spun right at us. Common sense told me that if something went wrong with the mechanism or the flyer lost control, he, the plane, and I would be rolled up into a ball. I felt a mingled fear and pleasure. My lucky bracelet. My first hop came in 1920 over Wilshire Boulevard, surrounded by oil wells. As soon as we left the ground, I knew I had to have a try there by myself. Miles away, I saw the ocean. The Hollywood Hills smiled at me over the cockpit. The ocean, the hills, and I were friends. I know there must be emotion with all new experiences, but all I felt on this occasion was interest. The noise of the motor seemed very loud to me. I think it seemed so on one's first flight. Of course, there was no sensation of speed, and I had no idea of the duration of the hop. As soon as we sat down, I was ready to sign up for another try at it myself. Of course, my finances remained a bit in the air, and so I took on a series of jobs. Telephone company, I liked the job and the boys. Truck driver for a sand and gravel company. Photographer, social worker, to pay for the lessons I so dearly wanted. If Mother was worried during this period, she didn't show it. When I had really learned to fly alone, she was a good sport to help me purchase a small, yellow, secondhand biplane. She became my best passenger. I didn't realize it at the time, but the cooperation of one's family and close friends is the greatest safety factor a fledgling flyer can have. I decided to continue my education at Columbia University in New York. Books have always meant much to me. Mother would read aloud to my sister Muriel and I thought Father had read everything. He would define words, we would try to trip him up. I was interested in medicine, fascinated by physics and chemistry, along with poetry written in French verse, which I inserted when I didn't know the answers to my physics questions. Of course, this didn't count as an answer, but I had fun and not much money. But I could not forget flying. And so I decided to join the National Aeronautic Association of Boston. Now, if one follows where an interest leads, the knowledge or contacts will be found useful someday. If I hadn't joined the NAA, there would not have been a friendship crossing for me. In 1928, I was simply asked if I would do something for aviation that might be hazardous. Our 20-hour, 40-minute flight aboard the airplane Friendship dropped down in Buryport, Wales. Captain H.H. Rayleigh asked me if I was excited. Excited. No. It was a grand adventure, but all I did was lie on my tummy and take pictures of clouds. Dawn touches them with rose that melts into gold. Evening colors them with a myriad of changing tone till gray envelops all. I was genuinely surprised at the amount of attention this woman received at the expense of the men who were really responsible for the flight. But there had been 18 previous transatlantic flights. I was the only woman and the first to make the crossing by air. Someday, I will have to do it alone, if only to vindicate myself. I'm a false heroine, and that makes me feel very guilty. Someday I will redeem my self-respect. I cannot live without it. In the next several months, I went from earning just enough to pay for my lessons to accumulating $50,000 from various avenues of employment. This involved 27 lectures a month, 8 articles a year for Cosmopolitan, and promotions. Justly or unjustly, ticket sellers accused women as being their greatest sales resistance encountered. The saying went, "Father won't fly if mother says he can't." Oh, I should mention that even dearer to me than such opportunities, the man who was to find the girl to fly the Atlantic and who found me and managed the flight was George Palmer Putnam, a man who looked past me as if I were a sack of potatoes upon our first meeting, and whom I married in 1931, doubtful of my ability to cope with matrimony. My parents' unhappy marriage and my need for freedom set little trust in this institution. On the morning of our wedding, I handed George this letter. Dear GP, there are some things which should be written before we are married, things we've talked over before, most of them. In our life together, I shall not hold you to any medieval code of faithfulness to me, nor shall I consider myself bound to you similarly. If we can be honest, I think the differences which arise may best be avoided. Please let us not interfere with each other's work or play, nor let the world see private joys or disagreements. In this connection, I may have to keep some place where I can go to now and then, by myself, for I cannot guarantee at all times the confinements of even an attractive cage. I must exact a cruel promise, and that is that you will let me go in a year if we find no happiness together. I will try to do my best in every way. A.E. After the wedding, I wired my sister Muriel, "Over the broomstick with GP, break the news gently to mother." Without my husband's encouragement, I could not have accomplished what I have. One morning in '32, I put down the newspaper and I asked George, "George, would you mind if I flew the Atlantic?" Always supporting me in every way. He said, "That is great." In preparation, I got an odd hours of flying, mostly devoted to blind flying, until I really felt comfortable about handling the ship without looking outside of the cockpit, that is, by instruments alone. One morning in '32, I got a telephone call from George. "Perfect flying weather, fine visibility all the way. That settled it. We'll leave this afternoon. No time for luncheon." As fast as I dared, traffic cops being what they are, I drove the 25 miles home to Rye. 5 minutes was enough to pick up a few things, and a lingering few more to drink in the beauty of the dogwood tree beneath our bedroom window. Those sweet blooms smiled at me a radiant farewell. That is a memory I shall never forget. As for the difficulty of long flights, if one is in good condition, one needs little food and little sleep. On my solo Atlantic flight, I took no change of clothes and sipped 1 can of tomato juice during the 15-hour flight. The greatest joy of flying is the magnificence of view. Colors stand out, and shades unseen from below form an endless magic carpet from the air of whatever country. Ever shifting, ever changing, light and shadow hold beauty only the willfully blind could ignore. I hit a severe storm and held my course with difficulty. Ice began to form on my airspeed indicator, causing it to register inaccurately. I pulled down, hoping the ice would melt, but flying close to the surface cannot be done safely with the equipment we have today, and so I just pulled back up and plowed through the soup until morning. I noticed a blue flame licking through a broken weld in the manifold ring and began wondering if one preferred drowning to incineration. Of the 5 hours of storm and darkest midnight, I was buffeted about as I'd never been before. The last 2 hours were the hardest. My exhaust manifold was vibrating very badly. 3,000-foot vertical drop. As I pulled back and leveled out, through the blackness, I could see the white caps of the ocean, too close for comfort. The exhaust manifold was continual to vibrate. I turned on my reserve tanks. Fuel began running down my eyes. I knew I had to come down wherever that was. The first place I encountered was Londonderry, Ireland. I circled about, hoping to find a landing field, but all I found were lovely pastures instead. And so I managed to frighten all the cattle in the country. And there ended my flight and my happy adventure. There were more adventures of hospitality and kindness at the hands of my friends in England, France, Belgium, Italy, and America. President Hoover wired me. He said, "I demonstrated the capacity of women to match the skill of men in carrying through the most difficult feats of high adventure." And my favorite was from my dry cleaner. "I knew you'd make it. I never lose a customer." There were more flights, logging thousands of miles. A solo flight from Honolulu to LA. A goodwill flight from LA to Mexico City. A nonstop flight across the Gulf of Mexico, up the East Coast to New Jersey, and the Transcontinental Air Derby, just for the fun of it. My round-the-world flight had to be postponed due to my heavy lecture schedule and being an advisor at Purdue University. I especially enjoyed talking with the young women there. Nowadays, a girl must believe completely in herself as an individual. She must realize at the outset that to receive credit for a job, she must do that job better than a man. She must be aware of the various discriminations, both legal and traditional, against women in the business world. And so I'm inclined to say, if you want a job, try it. And if you are the first woman to fuel an urge in that direction, what does it matter? Fuel it and act on it. It may turn out to be fun, and to me, fun is the indispensable part of work. If you want to know how many people would like to fly around the world, ask and see what the mailman brings. I've received numerous letters from boys and girls, bless their hearts, ready to embark with me. I am 15 years old, 105 pounds, quiet, and want to see the world. I haven't got money, but will work my head off. That was from Michigan. There was a sweet child in Kentucky who begged, "Please teach me to fly. I will repay you if it takes the rest of my life. I haven't got much because my father works in a coal mine." Mostly the volunteers ranged in age from 10 to 15, but there were a few grown-ups. One persistent applicant said he was a single fella, and he carried government life insurance in case killed in an airplane. I have found that when everything is going very well indeed, it is time to anticipate trouble. And conversely, when all seems sour beyond words, a break lurks just around the corner. We had planned on a dawn start from Honolulu on the first leg of our round-the-world flight. So easily was the airplane going down the concrete runway, I thought the takeoff was actually over. 10 seconds later, the airplane lay helpless on the runway. A broken bird with battered wings. I don't know what happened. 2 minutes later, we emerged from the cockpit. I knew what I wanted to do. If we don't burn up, I want to try again. As you go through life, you find the unexpected. By adventuring about, you become accustomed to the unexpected. The unexpected becomes what it is, the inevitable. This will be my last adventure. I plan on giving up long-distance stunt flying. It's hard to grow old. So hard. It's hard to be old. I think, GP, that I shall not live to be old. Knowing the hazards, with Fred Noonan as my navigator and I as the pilot, we took off on May 20th, 1937 from Oakland, California. Push through. We're always pushing through. Hurrying on our long way, never staying long enough to enjoy where we're at. A situation about which there was no use complaining. I had my schedule, I must abide by it. This was not a voyage of sightseeing. Oh, but there were so many sights I'd wanted to see. Those lovely white Caribbean cities nestled among green hills. I did have a small adventure in India riding a camel. Its owner said it was a naughty camel. I wanted to tell him I'd be naughty too if I had 2 leather plugs in my nose attached to guiding reins. In Australia, I especially wanted to meet its famous woman flyer, Jean Batten, and see a koala bear. I missed out on both. At dawn, we left the fringes of our 5th continent, eagerly homeward bound. At Lae, New Guinea, I made my usual stopover call to George, in addition to keeping my journalistic records. From Lae, we covered the longest portion of our trip, 7,000 miles. Little over a month ago, I was on the shore of the Pacific looking westward. Today, I look eastward over the Pacific. In those fast-moving days that have intervened, the whole width of the world has passed behind me. Only the broad ocean. I will be glad when its navigation is behind me. Letter to be read if last flight. Please know, I am quite aware of the hazards. I want to do it because I want to do it. Women must try to do as men have tried. And when they fail, their failure must be but a challenge to others. Thank you. Amelia Earhart disappeared 3 weeks shy of her 40th birthday. She was a woman with a strong determination and a very weak constitution. The Roosevelt administration conducted the largest search for an aircraft in the history of aviation. At this point in the play, I enjoy taking questions from the audience. Yes?
Did you do all of your own research of her writings?
Yes, I did. This is all her words. It was done before you could go on a computer and just click, so I'm a little jealous now. But yes, I did. These are all from her own writings and her diaries, her letters, everything that I can get my hands on. And someone calls my play a living play. The reason it's a living play is because every time I'm doing it, I learn new things and new research to discuss and impart and share, and anything you have to share, as I look and learn more about her. Also, my perception of her constantly changes. As I get older, I see her words in different ways. I understand things a little different. So I'm constantly bringing new things to the production and wanting to share it with you, and vice versa. Question? Questions?
Are you a pilot?
I am not a pilot, but I have been in the cockpit and I have been at the controls. And when I was doing a television show, the pilot had me actually fly it. I didn't land it, thank goodness, but I actually flew it. And I've been encouraged by members of the 99s who I've met throughout the years. So it is in my possible flight plan to learn in the future. Yes?
What got you interested in creating this?
Amelia Earhart was a visionary. She was an inspiration. She was someone who motivated people. And recently, I don't know if many of you heard, of course, but in order to celebrate and acknowledge Women's History Month, Hillary Clinton included her among the great women and mentioned her. And Hillary said, and I agree with this, of course, because it's part of my inspiration, Hillary Clinton said, Amelia Earhart, in her time, inspired people to do things and be bigger and bolder. And she is still, to this day, an inspiration for people today in our circumstances to think bigger and bolder. We're hoping that you, as 99s, are doing the same thing. You are inspiring our youth. You are motivating young women and young men to go forward and try to become and involved in aviation and other aspects, to follow their dreams. I feel the same way. She was somebody who spoke her mind. She was very diplomatic, but she always spoke her mind, and she was a person who fought for women's rights and human rights. And so she inspired me. I feel that I could bring this to other people and hopefully at least continue some of those inspirational words to others. Questions? Questions? Yes?
How long have you been doing the Amelia Earhart show?
Well, I am Amelia Earhart, so it's 114 years. No. No, this particular show, I've been doing for 12 years. This is the 12th year. And so it's been a lot of fun, and I've gotten to meet a lot of people from the very beginning. Gabrielle Brezhnik was one of the first people I met 12 years ago at the Museum of Flying. And I also met Bobby Trout that year, too. And I've met the Tuskegee Airman, the youngest one, Mr. Miller. I've just had the most incredible opportunities because of this. And I've met just so many fabulous people, and I'm just so happy to be here. Question, yes.
Do you take your show into like schools?
We've taken it to schools, it's been to libraries, it's been, Boeing loves it, we performed it. One of the thrills was performing it for George Putnam Jr., the son of George Putnam and Amelia's stepson. That was a thrill. I've gotten to know the family. That's another thing. I've gotten to know the family. I've gotten to know her cousins and some secret little things that nobody would know about. For instance, George Putnam Jr. said that she used to take him for rides on her airplane. And he really enjoyed that, and he really liked her, and she was very kind. And I've gotten to know many people in aviation. The first woman to be one of the pilots for the Airbirds, which are they're kind of like a stunt naval. Thunderbirds. That's it. Thank you. Correct. So that's been very, very exciting for me. Curiosity questions, things you always wanted to know but you were afraid to ask? I'm open to it. Yes?
How would you be able to incorporate the 99s into your presentation?
Ah, very nice. That's something I actually wanted to bring up. Because, as you know, you are the organization that she started, and it was 99 people in the organization, so they called the 99s, as you know, and she was the first president, and I could incorporate that. And when I do the letters, I do another show about her letters. There's a letter she wrote. It was just before she was going to take off for her solo Atlantic flight, the one where she was actually flying the plane in 1932. An hour and 19 minutes before she took off, she sent a wire to one of the 99s, making sure that everything was written correctly in the next newsletter. And I'm so glad you asked me, because it was something I wanted to share, because I was just reading it yesterday, and I thought, oh, she was very criticized for being a multitask, and they always said she was doing too much before she did her round-the-world flight, and that is why she disappeared, and she had too many things going on. But if you look at all her letters, and you look at her life, since she'd been a child, she was always multitasking. And one of the things she says in one of her letters is that the more you do, the more you can do. And that's an actual quote from her. And her husband also knew that about her. So when I read things that say that that was a fault on her part, it was her personality. She just was in fact, before all her flights, she was making sure her mother and her sister were taken care of financially. She was sending them letters. She was making sure their clothes would be correct. She was very concerned about how they presented themselves to the press, that they didn't say anything about her that they shouldn't, all the time. And she was concerned about her own appearance. And one of the things she did always say was, you don't say anything negative to the press about yourself. So the things that are printed that she knew would be public for public consumption, you really don't know what was behind that until you try to find the things that were private letters. And the sad thing is that when there was a fire, I'm sure most of you know about that, at their home in Rye, New York, the room that got devastated the most was where they kept the files, and her poetry and her personal letters and things. The letters that we do have are the ones her mother kept that was sent to her mother by Amelia. So those we have. But a lot of the letters that might have been more personal to other people or from others, a lot of those are gone, along with a lot of her poetry, because of that fire. I'm sure they were extremely devastated just in general. They lost so much in that fire. Before they were moving to Toluca Lake. So that's and thank you for the question. Questions? Yes, sir.
You as Amelia, will we ever find you?
Oh, well, since I'm right now, I'm me talking about Amelia. That I leave up to your conjecture. As you know, July is going to be a very busy month for Amelia. She's going to be quite disturbed because a number of investigative companies are going out again to look for her. And this brought out the number of theories and the number of people that are researching to find her. As you know, the facts are that she was flying at 7:42 a.m. on July 2nd, looking for Howland Island. She was circling, and she said, "I am circling, I am circling. I cannot find you, but I must be on you." At 8:42, which technically would have been past the time when she had enough fuel by calculations, she was frantic on the voice phone, and she was not able to find Howland Island, as you know. After 8:42 a.m., they no longer heard her voice. The only thing we know is that it ended at that point. Whether she ditched into the ocean, which is the common acknowledged theory, or one of the theories they're trying to prove right now is that she landed on an atoll. One of them considers on Nicomora Island, which I'm sure you've heard about. It's been researched many times. There is a theory that she got over to Saipan and that natives saw her there. There is a theory that she was captured by the Japanese, that she was executed. There's theories that she was living in New Jersey. That's a real interesting one. And that other things that she wanted to get away from her husband. That's another thing, and she never wanted to acknowledge him, and there she disappeared. The theories go on and on and on.
Do you want to be found?
Do I want to be found? Well, let's see, she'd be 114, I think, now. So it might be a little difficult. You know, things, you get used to your way of life by that age. I don't know, but she, you know, whatever you think, and you know there's many, 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 many books, many, many theories as to what happened to her, beside the idea that she just went down. And what she had said was, when I go, I want to go in my plane fast. So that's, you know, that is the information we have. Question? Yes, yes.
Why did she pick Fred Noonan to be her navigator?
You know, timing and luck is everything, right? Originally, as you know, the flight was supposed to take off, and it did, in May. They left from Oakland, and they went, the first leg was supposed to go from Oakland to Honolulu. On that flight, she had Fred Noonan, and she had Paul Mance, who was her technical advisor. And she had Harry Manning, who was supposed to be the radio operator. He was the best guy in at the time, in radio operations for aircraft. So, and Fred Noonan was also going to be on that flight, and he was known, he was the top Pan Am navigator of his era. He was the top.
But didn't he drink?
Well, wait a minute. Yes, he drank. What I was going to say was that all those people were supposed to be on the flight with her, and they were on the first attempt. When she crashed the plane, or the plane turned and she had to, and it crashed one side of it, they had to reroute the entire flight. So they were going originally from Oakland to Honolulu and around the world. They had to have the plane repaired, and they had to recalibrate everything. And the plane was going to go instead the other direction, going from Oakland to Miami and then out. So in this case, Howland would be the last. The reason I mention that is because timing is everything. Harry Manning had to pull out of it because now things were changed. He couldn't stay with the group. Paul Mance started having trouble with GP. They had conflicts. The only person left was Fred Noonan. And he took on the job of everything. Okay? Now, he was considered a very good navigator, but he did celestial navigation, and he didn't know anything about radio communication. And neither did she. Neither one of them. And GP took over the technical aspects that Paul Mance was originally taking care of. And he did not, even though he loved flying and he loved adventure, he didn't know anything about airplanes. So all these decisions now were being made by people who were not qualified in the areas that they were having to make decisions, a lot of it. Now, addressing the idea of his alcoholism. Amelia Earhart was very, very used to being around alcoholic men. She had lived her whole life that way. Her father was an alcoholic. Also, when she took that friendship flight, that first one as a passenger, the pilot, Wilbert Stultz, was drunk all the time. And he was the one who was going to fly that plane. They had to wait 14 days before they left from Newfoundland to go across the Atlantic, and he was dead drunk the entire time. And you can see it in the photos. Photos tell you more. For me, I look very carefully at the photos. You can learn about body language. You can understand relationships, at least I do. I can tell, are people getting along or are they not? You know, is their relationship good or is it not? Do they look awake or do they not? Now, sometimes if you half blink, which we've all done in a photograph, but if you look at the photo of Wilbur Stultz, he looks so inebriated in those photos, and yet she said, no matter what happens, we're going to fly on that, and they did, and they made it across. So I think intellectually, she was very used to all these pilots, all these people in her life. She got through it all. Now, in addressing another part of your question, there was a secret code between her and her husband if there was a problem with Noonan drinking. And it was, the words were personnel problems, okay? When she was leaving Lae, New Guinea, she mentioned something to this effect. And her husband, by phone, said, just give it up. Don't go. Don't continue. And she said, oh, all right, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And Jean Vidal, who was also very, very close, and he was also with Putnam at the time, he also agreed, you know, just don't go, don't continue, and you know, and she was so close. I mean, how many of us? Even the other day I did this. I said to somebody, I was doing, oh, it'll be fine. How many of us have already? We're tired, we're doing something, but we have our investment in it personally, and we go, okay, no, you know what? It'll be fine. It'll be fine. We'll make it. We just got to go a little bit further. We know we've done this before. We've dealt with this. And who's to say? You know, who's to say that was the reason that maybe she disappeared or not? There were so many factors involved with her disappearance. So many factors. The coordination, the communication between GP and the ships that were supposed to guide her into Howland was completely offline. It was completely out of sync. She didn't know how to use radio communication. She was only using voice. The Itasca ship, who was supposed to guide her in, wasn't using voice. They were using Morse code. She left her Morse code book out of the airplane. She didn't take it with her. She didn't take her Morse code. She didn't take a parachute. She didn't take her bracelet. And this is the only thing of everything she didn't take that is the mystery to me. Because if you look at every photograph of her, every photograph, that bracelet is on her wrist. She doesn't have a wedding ring on. I don't never see a wedding ring on her hand. But that bracelet is always on her wrist. Start looking at her photos and you will always see. If you find one that doesn't have that, let me know. My email is on those cards. Now you can what? You can Facebook me, you can Twitter me. You know, I try to put out information that I learn about Amelia and about women who are unsung heroes. I tweet it, I Facebook it, I put it out there on IMDb, Internet Movie Database. But this is something really it's interesting because I just read, and I didn't even realize it. Everyone talks about that she left her parachute, that she left her all her safety equipment. But you know what? She left her parachute on her flight by herself when she went across the Atlantic also. She just didn't want the weight. At least she didn't want any extra weight. And her theory, and we should all remember this, at least I should, She said, once she makes a decision, she no longer worries. And for the next 2 months, out of everything she would make a decision to fly to, or go through, or go around the world, or cross the Atlantic, whatever it was, she slept just fine. In fact, there's a letter by GP, her husband. He couldn't sleep. He would be a nervous wreck. He would be up the whole time while they're planning this trip. He said she slept right through everything. She had she never worried. Once she made a decision, she thought, no worries. That's it. So she's such an interesting and complex person, Any other secretive questions, any curiosities, anything else you always wanted to know but afraid to ask?
So what should we ask?
Oh, that's very interesting. What should you ask? Well, one of my friends mentioned that I should point out, and I thought this is interesting, no one ever talks about her femininity. When I started the play, it was always about, she's strong, she's kind of, they didn't see her as really that feminine. But, she had the most beautiful hands I've ever seen. For a woman who did work, she loved the garden. She just loved the garden, she and GP. And her hands were so gorgeous. That's why I had to go get a manicure, because I had to make my hands look as nice. She always wore lipstick. Always. She always wore lipstick. She always powdered her nose before those cameras came on. And what's interesting, do you ever see her with any grease on her face in any of those photos? Never. But I did read something recently where it said, she was all greased up. George Putnam was such a smart publicist. He had the camera, that was 1930s, right? 1928 to 1937. He restaged everything. That flight, when she crossed the Atlantic, the one you see her where she's on her plane and she's standing like this, well, that's been restaged the next day. So everything was, he kept her looking glamorous, and she kept her looking glamorous. She learned how to pose for the cameras. She learned how to smile. He told her, don't let your space between your teeth show. And you can watch the videos and you see her smiling, then all of a sudden she closes her mouth. And she keeps that space so that no one can see it. She always said, like I mentioned, you never say anything negative. She wrote her mother, when in France, speak of things French. When in England, speak of things English. Do not complain about the Roosevelt administration. They are the people who rule the earth. You always say things that are positive. And so when you read her private letters, you can see when maybe she didn't agree with some of the things that she knew she had to do in order to keep good relations with the press and everything. But she did always speak her mind. Just things like she told her mother, make sure that you pull your stockings up so that they don't wrinkle in the knees, Right, yes. And she would always, a little bit controlling, I guess, like any young daughter would do. She told her mother, I don't want you babysitting for my sister's 2 children together. And if you do, I'm holding my monthly check back from you. So, she felt, as we all have, we do what we think is best, and sometimes it comes off a little harsh when you read that, but it's true. She really felt that way, and she would write that. So she was always sending money to all her friends, all her relatives. She took care of everybody. She was very generous, and she was a forward-looking woman. She really knew that aviation was the future. She really knew, and she wouldn't have been a bit surprised how it is today. And boy, would she have been proud of all of you to think that you are still, you've built her organization to this size, and this is just a little part of you. So I think all of us together, we will hopefully inspire others, and keep her word alive and her legacy alive. Oh, thank you. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my goodness. Oh, I don't think closing, I would just like to leave you with the poem written by Amelia Earhart in 1928 when she was still a social worker in Boston, never dreaming she would become the famous aviator of legend. It is entitled Courage. Courage is the price that life exacts for granting peace. The soul that knows it not knows no release from little things, knows not the livid loneliness of fear, nor mountain heights where bitter joy can hear the sound of wings. How can life grant us boon of living, compensate for dull, gray ugliness and pregnant hate, unless we dare the soul's dominion? Each time we make a choice, we pay with courage to behold resistless day and count it fair. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah,
That was really,
it was amazing. She is Amelia, you know.
thank you very much.
She just, you just embody her, which is.
One of the 99s, thank you, I really appreciate that. Give you
Yeah.
a hug from Amelia.
So, did you get to meet her sister Muriel?
No, I haven't. I have her book. Did you meet her?
No.
Oh,
But
thank you
I've
so
met
much.
her contemporaries because, like, those of us that go way back, we met Eleanor Smith and Bobby Trout.
Oh, really? Yeah, I got to do that too. I mean, I met Bobby Trout, so thank you so much. I
Keep
really,
up the good work.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
I'll let
Thank
other
you.
people
Oh,
talk.
well, whatever. Oh, thank you. Hi. Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm Michelle.
Oh, hi,
Monterey
Michelle.
Bay chapter.
Monterey Bay. I love Monterey Bay. So, did you? You can. This
Can
is,
you take a picture of us?
Oh,
We don't know.
what was it? Yeah.
I had a question whether in,
Oh, we were going to take a picture, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you. You had a question? Oh, hi. Did you want to say, would you like to say something to the camera?
Thank you.
Would you like to say anything to the camera? Tell us about it.
we were wondering, because the couple live in the house that she lived in at Toluca
Yeah,
Lake.
Beverly.
And we were wondering, was she living at Toluca Lake before the departure for her final trip?
She was renting the house where those where Beverly lives.
Right. Was she living there then, before she left?
Yeah, I
found
think
that
she
out.
was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure she was. And then they were rebuilding the one down the street.
Right.
Yeah, but they were living in the one in Toluca Lake.
I wanted to confirm that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And I'll look it up for sure, but I'm 99 and 100% sure.
Good.
Yeah.
I would like to let them know that.
Oh, okay.
It was a marvelous.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Hi. Oh, yes, you may.
Everyone who won award certificates today, please come up here.
Thank you.
Lillian can take
Thank
a
you.
picture.
Would you? Oh, tell what?
It was just fabulous.
Tell so he can get that.
I just think you did a wonderful job, and it was so fascinating.
Thank you. Coming from 99, that's very important. What's your name?
Evelyn.
Oh, Evelyn, thank you. And you're a flyer.
Yes.
Yes, they're all flyers. They really fly.
Thank you again.
Oh, thank you again. Thank you. This has been great. Standing. Great. Thank you, hubby. Anyways. Oh, thank you. I think, I guess. I went to on camera. No, this is for me.
Please.
This is for me.
Oh,
Just tell the
okay.
camera what you
All right.
thought. Tell you what
Okay.
you thought. This is Gabrielle Brezhnik, whose husband was Amelia's photographer from 1932 to 1937. And she's been a big supporter of mine, haven't you, Gabrielle?
Yes, yes.
Tell the camera. So, would you like to say something?
Tonight, I think you topped it all.
Really? Thank you.
really did. Every time I see her performance, there's a little new twist to it, and tonight was wonderful.
Thank you.
It's always wonderful, but I certainly enjoyed it more than ever.
Oh, thank you.
Keep on doing it.
Oh, thank
Okay?
you.
And stay in touch.
Oh, I will. Always, always.
Bye-bye.
I love you. Thank you. Love you.
And we got an award.
Oh, and you're going to give it to me now. I get the award.
We'd love to get a picture with you.
Oh, I'd love to too. Thank
Where's
you.
Donna? Did you get her?
Do you want the hat? Or you want, this is fine. Is this okay? I can put the hat on if you want.
That was lovely.
Oh, thank you.
That was really nice.
Wow, what gorgeous women. Monterey Bay has a great, gorgeous group.
Thank you. We're better pilots.
One more? Good?
Yay! Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. I love Monterey. It's so gorgeous. Oh my gosh. Do you all live? You live like?
In the general vicinity, yes.
Oh, how nice.
Different places on the Monterey Bay.
Lovely place to fly.
Yeah.
Really?
If you're ever up there, call one of the 99s.
Yes.
And we will.
We're all close to the airport.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
Right over the coast.
Wow. Ned, can we fly? Just like George. Whenever I say that, it's like I'm speaking to my husband. Can we fly over the coast to the Monterey?
It's such a beautiful, beautiful area.
I love it. I love Monterey. The drive through it.
Oh, 17-mile drive?
Yeah. So
That's
it's just
gorgeous.
great. So you guys come all the way down here. So I hope you enjoyed it and.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank
Well,
you so much.
seeing old friends too. Sometimes we don't see them too often. So.
Oh, sure. You know what? Also, yeah. I mean, this is George. That's George, and that's Amelia. And this is her mother. That's her mother. I don't know if you've seen it.
These are in North Hollywood.
You're probably right because she's elderly and she did move in with them at that point. So, yeah. And see, one of the mistakes I always hear made, they always thought that her mother was a proper Victorian woman. It wasn't her mother. It was her grandmother. And you hear it all the time.
So
because
her mother was modern and
her whole family was her grandfather gave them like a football. He gave them, when they were little kids. I mean, they were. Now see, and her sister Muriel didn't follow in those footsteps. Her sister Muriel was very traditional. She got married, she had children, she became a teacher. But Amelia had this daredevil, and she called herself, she was a tomboy. At that time you'd call you a tomboy if you did things that were not traditional girly. That's good, yeah. But just one child went with that. But they were exposed to all these things. And the thing I didn't get to mention, because I wanted to tell everybody, was her cousin told me that when Amelia used to babysit the little kids, the babies, up in Kansas, in Atchison, she would run so fast with the stroller that people were afraid the baby would go flying out of the stroller. Yeah, it's true, because, her cousin told me that. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, he said, he says, I didn't think of her as anybody special. He knows I used to hear people, he's always really shocked when I, got older and found out that, like, people really thought a lot of this person because she was his cousin. She was just his cousin, just like all of us, you grew up with somebody, you go, how'd that guy ever become like, right? I mean, you're always like shocked, So it's really interesting to hear the family stories and hear what really happened, and what they really thought behind the scenes, So it's
like she was a nice person.
Well, she did everything for everybody, she really did. She supported all her relatives, her friends. She made sure things worked well for them, and she multitasked on everything. It was just like that. So.
Did it seem like she and GP were happy?
Oh yes, and that was another thing I didn't get to talk about. Okay, this week, I always look at the facts. Okay, you can't tell, but I looked really close at some of those photographs, and you know how people, when like when you love your husband, or where'd my husband go, you lean in.
Yeah,
you lean in. And she leans into him all the time. And if you heard in the letter, she said, if I'm not happy, let me go in a year.
Yeah.
She did say that, but she didn't go, and they didn't go. And they were two people who really, really, really supported each other and worked together all the time. And I feel more adamant about it right now than I've ever, because I looked at some new research just recently, because I've always okay, well, I'm not sure, And her family did say, they had a good marriage, that, they were just private. But the more I research it, and I look at those photos, they had a good marriage. That's why I mentioned, I don't know if I mention things in there quickly because I don't want to make too much, but those flowers were outside their bedroom window, not her bedroom window, their bedroom window. They didn't sleep in separate bedrooms. They slept in the same bedroom.
Do you think either of them strayed off the premises? Indiscretion?
There's no way to know that because you don't know.
Your gut feeling, I'm asking for.
I really.
Negative.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, maybe that's not negative, I didn't, there's no proof. There's no proof that shows that she ever did and that he ever did. They really seem like they were together, to be together. She had been accused twice. She'd been named as a correspondent in I think 2 divorces, but it wasn't any proof, and
malicious.
We don't know, but it doesn't look like it. It looks like they had a really good marriage, and they were together for the.
No, I'm sorry I brought it up.
Why? Why? It's curious. It's curious. That's what I wanted. I said, ask whatever you're afraid to ask, because.
I didn't think anybody had the balls but me to bring it up.
No, because that's questions always asked. That's always a question that's asked.
The recent film,
Yeah.
Well, I was privy to that information, and there's poetic license, and you need to sell a film.
Yeah.
And they wanted to make the film successful.
Yeah.
And so.
And they didn't really go deep into Amelia.
Yeah.
Well,
people who know a lot,
It was surface level.
That's another thing, for people who don't know anything, it got a lot of criticism, but for people who don't know anything about her, it was at least an introduction.
Right, yeah.
For people like all of us, well, we know so much that, and you go, well, my friend was Elgin Long, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's one of the major researchers. Okay, well, that's another person I've become friends with, and he said, he was a consultant on that film, and he was so, he was frustrated, but he said, it's poetic license. They want the film to sell.
The colors and the music in the film were wonderful. Just the recreating 1930s.
Yeah. And
The storm was awful.
it brought her to the public, right? It
Right.
brought her to the public, kind of like Red Tails did with the
Exactly.
KDA,
Exactly.
you know.
That was really Putnam's job. You know how many women? I just put it out on my Twitter. I'm getting really good at this. I'm starting to learn. I'm tried. I fought it. Okay. I found something that said 9 unsung female heroines from 1909. Women were doing, but Putnam was such a good publicist that he promoted her, so people knew about her. So that promoted women's rights. If you had a good publicist like that, if all those women had the publicists like him, you would know all about them from way back, from everywhere.
Yeah, there were women like Bessie Coleman, and
there were women all the
phenomenal
time.
Women, but they didn't have a publicist. They didn't have the media.
Right, and he did that, and and that's what he was known for, and that was his goal in the beginning. He thought, he didn't do things, it didn't come after the fact. He was looking for someone to be a passenger across the Atlantic first. And he had the book in mind first. That came before she flew. So it was all pre-planned. Everything was pre-planned, so
But her anger at it being a stunt.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you brought it up. Thank you.
But her anger at it being a stunt, and I'm going to do this for real.
Right, so, But anyways,
So-
thank you so much.
Can we, where's Michelle? Oh, well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you that I could be part of this. Thank you.
Oh.
Give us your camera.
Okay.
I gotta go print my boarding pass. We have a safe trip back home.
Oh, yeah, print your boarding pass. You want a good seat. So, yeah.
Okay,
where do I
just
put it?
hit the little camera. Oh, okay. We gotta get you back to your husband.
Okay.
He's like, okay.
No.
we've been here like
No,
2
that's
hours.
that's not true.
I'm gonna do it. Oh, that's good too. There you go.
Oh.
These cameras are just.
I know.
Thank you so much, and keep up the good work.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. This was just thrilling.
I am gonna follow you on Facebook.
Oh, yeah, follow me on Twitter. Do you know how to use Twitter yet?
I've never used.
I
Twitter.
know. It's a whole experience.
It's like I was like, maybe I should just focus on Facebook.
I know,
since
that's what
I'm
you have
an
to
old
do.
fogey.
No, that's beginning. You know, I feel like it's like Amelia. She didn't want to learn the radio stuff. She did fine without it. And you don't. You fight it. Then you go, oh, well, I can't fight it anymore. I give up. Anyways, so where are you from? Where are all of you from?
I'm from Palmdale, formerly from up north, formerly from
Wow.
Yeah, she used to be a member of our chapter, Monterey Bay.
Monterey Bay. Oh, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for doing this.
Oh, I loved
It
it.
was delightful.
And thank you. Thank you. It's been the high.